Welcome back, guys. Your midnight movie this week is 1990, The Bronx Warriors. This is probably one of my favorite Italian exploitation films. For those of you that aren't familiar, when I say Italian exploitation films, I don't mean films exploiting Italian culture, Italian art, Italian life. Rather, I mean movies made by Italian filmmakers in the 70s and 80s that were produced to capitalize on really popular American Hollywood or Western films. So you would have something like Lucio Fulci's Zombie or Zombie 2 that was purposely made and called Zombie 2 in its European release in an attempt to ride the coattails of George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, made in 1978. Zombie Due or Zombie 2 would follow in 79. So you would have this phenomenon occur uh, in Italy, across Europe, in an attempt to capitalize on popular Hollywood films and try to make people feel like, okay, this could be a sequel or this could be an addendum or something to it. And the great thing about what they did is films like 1990, The Bronx Warriors, rather than trying to be a sequel to a movie, would take maybe two popular concepts. In this case, The Warriors from 1979, a huge cult classic, um, and like Mad Max, and try to do kind of like a mashup of films. And that's really what this film is. There's 1990, The Bronx Warriors, which came out in I believe this is 1983, or sorry, 1982, and its sequel, which is even better, Escape the Bronx. They really ideally should be watched together. It's almost kind of one big, long, fun movie. But the first one that we're discussing today, 1990, The Bronx Warriors, was filmed in the Bronx in New York City by an Italian film crew in the early 80s. And if you're any regular viewer of my channel, you know that I am a huge, huge fan of um, 70s and 80s cinema, specifically stuff that was shot in places like New York or Chicago, but New York, especially if it was shot in the Bronx. People don't realize that the Bronx really was looked like a demilitarized zone, a completely dilapidated community by the early 80s. It looked like it had gone through a world war, just entire city blocks just empty of crumbling buildings and so forth. And so these Italian filmmakers took advantage of that and kind of made a film of a near future New York City where corporations and the government have fused together, and they are basically one by one leveling all of the Bronx to create uh, ultra luxury accommodations and living for the ultra rich. That could never happen, right? Um, and it's fun. It's aesthetic. It leans into, again, the themes and the aesthetics of the time, whether it be like the Mad Max films, post-apocalyptic films, films like The Warriors, and so forth. You have a really compelling lead in actor Mark Gregory, who is actually Marco de Gregorio. He was an Italian actor who sadly passed away in 2013. He had a brief career in the Bronx movies, 1990, The Bronx Warriors, then Escape the Bronx. He did a few others. Guy, frankly, looks like he could have been a model, but he's believable as sort of like this, guy who lives on the rough side of the tracks and rides a motorcycle and tells the cops to kiss his ass and all that sort of stuff. And he's just he's running around with his gang, his biker gang, just trying to survive in the Bronx. He ends up hooking up with the daughter of the guy who is basically planning the complete and total demolition of the Bronx. She's kind of sick of her rich, privileged life and decides she's done with that and her father. She doesn't like her dad and runs to the Bronx, hooks up with Trash. That's the character played by Mark Gregory, joins him and joins his biker gang. And as a result of her disappearing, what do you know? Dad, the ultra corporate billionaire real estate developer, he's going to get his daughter back, and he hires Vic Morrow, who was actually the father of, I'm blanking on Princess Leia. What was, um, I'm blanking on So he's the father of Jennifer Jason Lee and Carrie. Shit. Oh gosh, sorry guys. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. We'll edit this out. Fuck me. Um, TV movies, Final Rules, Personal Life. Okay, so yeah, no, okay, so yeah, Jennifer Jason Lee. I guess they had a fraught uh relationship, but anyways, Vic Morrow is hired as a guy called the Hammer by Anne's father. Anne is the young heiress who runs away, enjoys trash, and his gang. And yeah, this guy is just—he's a hired killer, and so the entirety of the film is the Hammer going after trash and his comrades in the biker gang, and it gets there's a lot of shooting and killing and cool gritty cityscapes and burned out buildings and the story here isn't really strong. I'll be honest with you. The sequel, Escape the Bronx, is actually, I think, a stronger film, though it was made fun of in an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000 in their seventh season. Um, it's then that one stars Henry Silva comes in, but 1990, The Bronx Warriors is still really fun. You have Fred Williamson of Black Exploitation royalty and action film royalty from the 70s and 80s show up in this film. Uh, I would say most of the cast here, it was just mostly Italian. I believe everyone is speaking English, of course, because it is an Italian exploitation film or any Italian film. It's all dubbed, and that's something. If you're not familiar with Italian films of the time, there was an old Mussolini era rule that all filmmakers could film whatever they wanted to, but they couldn't record audio, and audio would have to be recorded later because the state would have to look over what the lines were and would have to clear and make sure that it wasn't an affront to the fascist regime of the time. For whatever reason, that law never went off the books, and I think it lasted until about the early 90s. So whether you're watching 1990 The Bronx Warriors, Escape the Bronx, any of Lucio Fulci's horror films, if you're watching Dario Argento's films, you'll notice they're all dubbed. Even if the actors are speaking English, I think there's maybe a few exceptions where the lead, who might be like an American or an English actor, says, "No, you're gonna mic me. I'm not gonna do this entire film and then ADR the whole damn thing." So a few of them are recorded, but most everyone is dubbed. And you'll notice, you watch all of these Italian exploitation films, you'll recognize the same voices over and over. It was like they just did a whole bunch of them over a few years. Uh, but I really like the character of Trash. He's really sympathetic. He looks like a guy who, grew up on the wrong side of the tracks in New York. He's racially ambiguous. You're not sure, maybe, he could be any man. And that's kind of what is, I think, cool about his appeal. I love Vic Morrow as the Hammer. He's just sort of this, sunglassed, mustachioed, sort of badass. Just looks like every bad dude from every 70s movie your dad ever watched. And, it's believable. Stefania Girolani, who plays Anne, I believe she shows up in a few other movies. She is beautiful. Again, her character isn't super well developed, but she's believable. She does get a few moments to shine in terms of range. Again, this movie is not going to win any awards. This movie is not going to get any Oscar nominations, and it did not at the time. It's not a great movie. It's a fun movie. Again, this is a type of movie that would be shown on some public access channel across the country, in the 80s and 90s. And, they're just fun. These movies for me are nostalgic, but I'm not going to tell you they're the greatest films ever made. They're just fun. And that's how you need to go into these movies. A couple other notes. I do like within Trash's gang, you have a really interesting mix of characters and personalities. Some of the dialogue does make me giggle a little, not because it's terribly bad, but it's in parts. I'm like, you're trying a little too hard, but at the same time, it's kind of cool that this Italian film crew came over to New York City, came over to the States, and is just so blown away by the legend and the myth of New York and the Bronx and all this. They're like, yeah, we gotta make a movie like the Americans would make. We gotta have action. We gotta have a beautiful heroine. We've got to have a badass hero. We've got have a real formidable villain. We've got to have burnt out cityscapes. It's pure early 80s with a 70s sensibility. It's really pure aesthetic, which the Italians are so good at. So, where we could fault it maybe in the narrative, I think it more than makes up with just its inventiveness, its creativity, its style. And again, it's just fucking fun. And that's what you have to, I think, look at when you're going into watching these movies. 1990, The Bronx Warriors. It's currently streaming on Pluto. Pluto is another, I guess you could say it's similar to Tubi. I don't like the search functionality of it as well. Tubi's my benchmark for ad-based streamers. The depth and breadth of stuff on Tubi's amazing. But Pluto surprises me. Pluto has some really fun Italian exploitation movies. 1990, The Bronx Warriors. I found The New York Ripper on there, which we'll also review. That's one of my favorites. But yeah, if you're not familiar with Italian exploitation, if you want something just fun, something interesting to watch, I highly recommend 1990, The Bronx Warriors. But let me know. What do you guys think? Is it absolute cheese? Is it dreck? Is it schlock? Or do I have a point? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.